Welcome to Blue Glasses Math. In this podcast, we will explore how our self-perception as math teachers and learners influences our approach to life. Whether you identify as a math enthusiast or not, this podcast is for you. Are you a teacher, a parent, a school administrator, or a student? Join me as we shift our perspective on what it means to be a math person. Let's take a look. So today, you've got just me. I am here on a solo episode today, taking a break from my guests because I just wanted to reframe why I set this podcast up in the first place and have a conversation with you about what really drives the work that I do. So I'm so happy that you're here. I hope that you stick around till the end. If you haven't had a chance to tune into all of the amazing guests that I've had in the last several months, please go back and take a look. It's really incredible. Some of the people who have come to have conversations about teaching and learning math and really about the vulnerability and the humanness that have come up in all of those conversations, which I think is missing. I think it's something that we need more of in math education. And I think that it really speaks to where we are right now in the world about how, we need more people with whole hearts coming to the front to have conversations about, well, in this case, math. So I start with every episode by asking, what is your math story? So what is your math story? When you think back to learning math, what memories come up? What emotions come up first? What emotions come up first with those stories? Is it pride? Are those emotions joy? Do you remember frustration? Do you remember feeling fear? What do you remember about how you felt during math class? Maybe it was that time that you shot your hand up in the air because you knew you had the answer, but then the shame that you felt when that answer was wrong. Or maybe it's just quiet satisfaction of solving a problem that you once thought was impossible and having that feeling like, actually, I worked so hard and I got there. And it's that satisfaction, that aha moment. These are the feelings that we might have experienced in math class. And here's the thing, whatever came up for you in any of those memories, those emotions are part of your story. And those emotions helped to build the beliefs of how you see yourself as a math person or how you see math as something that's accessible to you or not. So today I want to really dig into why this matters, because math is just not about knowing facts, knowing procedures, algorithms. It's not about just strategies. Math is about how teaching and learning math is about how we feel when we are like grappling with mathematical ideas. So we'll get to that in a moment. But if we really think about it, we need to come to terms with emotions in math class. And here is why. Because if you look at the effective math teaching practices from NCTM or the standards for mathematical practice, all of these habits of mind and things that we need to do in math classes involve words that evoke emotions. So the first one that comes to my mind is grapple. When we're asking students to grapple with cognitively challenging tasks, do you know what the definition of grappling is? I wasn't really sure what the formal definition was, but I looked it up today online and I found a reputable source. To grapple means to engage in a close fight or struggle without weapons, or to wrestle with an idea. And so if you think about that, there's peaks and valleys in engaging in a close fight or struggle. There's times where you may feel like you want to give up or that you need to give up or that you maybe want to relieve yourself of the discomfort that comes with being in a close fight or a struggle. But then there's also these emotions that come out on the other side when hopefully you win that close fight, or you win that wrestling competition and you've gotten through it without weapons, but maybe with tools. And maybe those tools are math tools, but they also might be your emotional tools of that those feelings of, I can do this, I can get through this. And sometimes it's the tools that come along with being in a classroom where you might feel supported, right? That you might feel like, okay, it's okay that I don't know the answer right now, or it's okay that I don't know the solution to this problem, or I don't know the algorithm, but maybe I have a strategy that I can pull. If you go back to the episode where it was Pam Squared, where we talked, Pam Harris and I talked about the the strategies that we help students to develop over the years that they can build on and make more complicated as they develop more mathematical skills. And providing an opportunity for students to develop those strategies may also involve some grappling, to grapple with ideas. Another word that comes in the standards for mathematical another word that comes in the standards for mathematical practice, those habits of mind that sometimes go overlooked, but these are the habits of mind that we use on a daily basis when we are in math class. And the first one is my favorite. It's make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. So once again, I went to my handy dictionary and I looked up to the word persevere. So persevere means to continue in a course of action, even in the face of difficulty or with little or no prospect of success. I'm going to read that again. We have this written into our standards for mathematical practice. To continue in a course of action, even in the face of difficulty or with little or no prospect of success. Like, what? We've actually written this in the standards of what we want students to be able to do. And here's why. Both of these actions, both grappling and persevering, position our learners to have the hope that they can work through something challenging in math class and beyond. So these emotions that they experience while they're grappling and they're persevering with math problems, where there may be no end in sight, where they may feel like they're stuck beyond belief. But then if you think about, these are virtues, these are virtues that we need to be able to be human in this world, especially in the world that our children who are sitting in our classrooms right now need to develop. They need to develop those opportunities. They need to have opportunities to grapple. They need to have opportunities to persevere. And in those opportunities come not just opportunities to learn the math, but opportunities to learn how to be human, to learn how to fall down and get back up again and not feel like they've failed. So students walk into our classrooms with carrying these backpacks full of stuff, but they also carry their emotions. They carry the beliefs about what math is and whether they belong in these classrooms. And those beliefs are fueled by the emotions that they experienced in like previous math classes or maybe during their homework last night. And they continue to shift. And you may hear some crinkling in the background, and that's okay because that's my puppy. It's late at night tonight, and she's ready to go to bed. So am I. All right, so let's dive into the research a little bit. Research tells us that when doing math, students feel all these emotions, right? But research also tells us that teachers can have an impact on how students navigate those emotions. So no teacher is responsible for their students' emotions in math class. That's not what I'm saying here. What I am saying is that kids are going to have emotions. They're going to feel frustration. They're going to feel joy. They're going to feel elation. They're going to feel disconnected. They're going to feel like they want to escape. And it is up to us as teachers to provide spaces and to create spaces in our classrooms where all those emotions are welcome. And also in our own emotions, that's all we can control, right? Is how we respond using our emotional intelligence to figure out how we can navigate these moments of frustration. So here's an example of something from my doctoral research. I looked at teachers in an urban setting and middle school. And in this one particular scene, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but students were working on a cognitively challenging problem. And this one particular student they were working on the problem in groups. And this one particular student, his name is Shay, that's his pseudonym. And in this one particular episode or situation, they like literally slammed his hand on the table and was so frustrated. The teacher came over and asked, tell me what's going on over here. And I don't remember her exact words, but the point is, she didn't ignore what was going on. She also didn't try to rescue him. She actually instead asked him this. She said, I see that you're working on this. She pointed to his paper and she said, you have some ideas. She asked a question about his ideas. She showed interest in his work. And she held him accountable for thinking by pointing out that he had some things on his paper that were going to move him in the right direction. But then she did something really interesting. She started to back away, and she said to Shay, I'm going to step away. I'm going to go work with those students over there. And when I come back, I will be back to see your progress. So in that moment, she made space for Shay to have his emotions, but she also made space for Shay to have access to 3 basic psychological needs that show up in every single math classroom because they're human. So these are the 3 needs that I think belong in every single math textbook or every single math, how to teach math book. There are 3 psychological needs. The first one is autonomy. The second one is competence. And the third one is relatedness. If you want to learn more about this is from a theory called self-determination theory. If we look at the instance with the teacher and Shay, she didn't let him off the hook for his mathematical thinking. She didn't rescue him. She didn't take his pencil from his hand, and she didn't impose her own thinking in any way. But she gave him a chance to be human and to think and gave him space to do that. So through her actions and her acceptance of his frustration, but also her actions of like, I know you're going to get through this, but it's on you to get through it. It's not on me. There's a reframe there. I think a lot of times in math classes, or any classes, we try to make everything so like enjoyable for kids. And I'm not saying we shouldn't make math enjoyable. Of course, math is lovely. And obviously I wouldn't have a podcast about math if I didn't think it was enjoyable. But what I am suggesting here is that the emotions are necessary parts of math, teaching and learning, the grappling, the perseverance. We need to have those ups and downs. And if we strip that away by making everything comfortable and happy and rainbows and sunshine all the time, then we're not teaching our students that we trust them to be able to get through the math on their own. So let's talk about the 3 basic needs. So I'm going to start with autonomy. So autonomy is just what it sounds like. It is the need to feel like we have choice and control over the thing that we're doing. We need to have something where we have control over it. Like me as a learner, as a student in your class, needs to know that I have some choice and some control over what we're doing. One of the things that I've noticed in classrooms that I visit is that when a student is struggling and they feel like they don't have a choice and they don't have control, their hand goes up and they need to use the restroom. And I'm not saying kids don't need to use the restroom because they might, but a lot of times that's an avoidance behavior. I know it happened in my class where I finally started realizing that, the bathroom log was filling up on days where I was teaching things that were more conceptually challenging because students were looking for an escape because they didn't feel like they had choice or control. The second basic psychological need is competence. And these are not in any particular order. I'm just reading them to you in different orders. Okay. So competence. Competence is the need to feel like you can be capable and successful at the task that is in front of you. So when we bring students into maybe we have a student who needs a little bit more support in, let's just say additive thinking. And then all of a sudden we're trying to teach them a skill that requires multiplicative thinking. That student, there's a disconnect between what they're feeling they are capable of and being able to be successful at the new skill. And so competence means we need to give students that edge, that feeling that, okay, this is based on this gets into like prior knowledge, right? I feel like this looks familiar and now I can build on what I know to find out what I don't know. So one of my favorite ways to explain competence in math class is when we're teaching students multiplication. And we start with zeros, ones, twos, and fives, because we start with those because we want students to be able to then build on those to be able to extrapolate the other skills and find connections. So if a student, for example, knows 2 times 6 is 12, then they can also figure out what 4 times 6 is because they can use the doubles facts. So we can talk about that and get deeper into the math, but I think you might get the idea to just get started. And then the last one is relatedness, to feel connected, to be seen, and to be safe, to know that even in the face of struggle, my struggle is validated and okay and welcomed in this space. And I am safe to slam my hand down on the table if I am just frustrated and I feel like I'm just not ready to have a breakthrough. So I'll give you a quick concrete example of what this would look like in a classroom. All right. So for example, if a student only hears, follow these steps, take out your notebook, write down these notes, autonomy shrinks right away. If they don't feel successful and they feel like the teacher holds the key to the castle, and that if I don't have my notes, or if I don't have the teacher standing next to me, or the teacher taking my pencil out of my hand and doing it for me, now I can't be successful. And if they don't feel like they can share ideas, they don't feel welcome to share or be wrong or take risks, that's when relatedness fades away. So let's reframe this into a more positive example. So here's a practical thing. So I've been in a lot of classrooms recently, and practically speaking, a lot of the classrooms I've been in, the students have been learning about place value with whole numbers, place value with large numbers, place values with small numbers, and place value with decimals. So here's an example of how to meet those 3 needs, the psychological needs, and to address the idea of emotions in your math class. So the first one is that I'm thinking of like a task that I love to bring to teachers that has to do with rounding. So a lot of times we ask students like round 322 to the nearest 10, or round 322 to the nearest 100. And then students do it dutifully. They write it down and or maybe they sing the song. Maybe they sing the song, or there's a rhyme that I'm not even going to say. But they come up with these different mechanisms to remember how to round to the nearest 10 or round to the nearest 100. But what if we reframed that task and said, I rounded a number to the nearest 10 and I got 530. What numbers could I have rounded? So that's the question. I rounded a number to the nearest 10 and I got 530. What numbers could I have rounded? So first of all, that task lets students choose where they start. It lets them label their number line or explain it in their own way. Like, what numbers could they think of? And as a teacher, you could say, is there more than one answer? Right? If the students are kind of like confused at first, because sometimes kids are like, oh, well, there could be lots of numbers. So now you've given them choice without losing a direction, without losing some structure. Now, once the students choose their number, so let's suppose the student offers 528, then the question could be, is that the only answer? And then another student might say 531. And that's an only answer. Are there more answers? And maybe even some students might explore decimals, like 529 and 9/10. Would that round to the nearest 10? Would it round to 530? Yeah, it would. Exactly. So here they're making decisions about what counts and why it is reasonable. So that fosters the competence, right? That fosters the competence, because they're like, oh, okay. So now I can not only be autonomous in choosing lots of different numbers, but I can also think about why the decimal, for example, what did I just say? The decimal was 529 and 9/10. Why does that decimal round to the nearest 10 and end up at 530? And finally, relatedness. So the relatedness can be considered in some ways like the emotional glue of the classroom. As students are sharing their ideas, they're hearing from one another, they're connecting with one another. Maybe they're turning and talking to the person sitting next to them. And now you have, sometimes I would do this on Post-it notes, like each student has their own Post-it note, and all of those numbers round to 530. And you can even do them in different Post-it note colors so that they can see the numbers that quote unquote round down to 530 and the numbers that round up to 530. You can also ask questions like, did anybody's number surprise you? Did somebody in this classroom change your mind, and why? So here you're not just teaching math, you're also creating opportunities for students to feel like they belong in math class. So I've got my little buddy here with her toy. Excuse me. And then finally, sometimes I like to flip the task. So now I'm thinking of a number that doesn't round to 530, but it's really close. What might it be? And so here we have some concrete, simple examples that you can do in your classroom tomorrow without needing a worksheet, without needing to go to copy machine, and without reading a book about psychology, because we know you have enough on your plate. So what I'm asking is to start paying attention to, again, I'll reiterate this clearly, you are not responsible for your students' emotions, but I believe we do have a responsibility for ourselves to respond in an emotionally intelligent way when students experience emotions in math class, and to allow those emotions within reason, allow the emotions to be there. Of course, the behaviors have to be reasonable, right? And the behaviors have to be safe, and the behaviors have to, if a student is really melting down, then of course we need to have an intervention and a conversation or some other thing. But I'm talking about the emotions that take place when students are grappling with ideas and when they're working on their perseverance. You've got to let those emotions happen in math class. So that's my story for today. I hope that you got some value out of this episode, this solo episode. It's been on my mind. And the reason why it's been on my mind is because I'm in classrooms and I'm witnessing these emotions. I'm witnessing teachers deal with the emotions, and really pushing teachers to not rescue students from their feelings that they're experiencing in math class, but to lean in and let those emotions happen. Provide structure so that students can feel safe, not knowing, but knowing that their not knowing is going to lead to their knowing, if that makes any sense. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up here. I've got some squeaky toys now below my feet, but thank you for listening. Again, if you haven't had a chance to follow, I'm going to ask you right now, hit that follow button or subscribe, whatever it says. I hope that you got some value out of this episode. And I also wonder, will I see you at NCSM? So I'm presenting at NCSM. For anybody who's stuck around to the end of this episode, come visit me in my session. You can look on LinkedIn. I put the announcement up there where it is. And I'm so excited to see all these beautiful faces in person. If you got value out, what did you find value in this episode? Send me a message, send me a DM, screenshot it, tell people, share, like, all these things are going to help more people find this podcast so that they can find value and get ready for the next guest, because they're coming up. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great day. Oh, there's one more thing I wanted to say. Okay. I always ask my guests at the end, what gives you hope? And here's why I ask this question. So this is one of my anchor texts that I use. This is not a math book. This is called Atlas of the Heart. It's by Brene Brown, who's one of my faves. And in Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart, she basically talks about a whole bunch of different emotions, what they are and why we need them, and how they help us live as humans. And this quote is one of my favorites. The quote is, "We need hope like we need air." So I always ask my guests at the end of every episode, what gives you hope in the math education space? So here's what gives me hope. What gives me hope is the students who walk into our classrooms every single day, and the teachers who teach them, and all of the teachers who I have worked with over the last couple of decades, who are willing to work hard, who are, what's the word I'm looking for? They're determined. They're not giving up on these kids, even in the face of all the things that are going on in the world. Every day they're showing up with smiles on their faces, welcoming their students into their classrooms. That gives me hope. Another thing that gives me hope are the leaders, the math education leaders, who are helping to support teachers. It's not always easy for any of us. And so it gives me hope that we're all working together to make things better. All right, take care. I'm Pam Brett. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Blue Glasses Math. Please follow me wherever you get your podcasts and follow along on the conversation on Instagram. And remember, being a math person is all just a matter of perspective.